What happens when one of the most unfiltered men on television sits across from one of the most competitive men to ever play in the NFL? On live morning television, with millions of people watching, and absolutely nothing goes according to plan. You are about to find out. Gordon Ramsay has built his entire career on one thing: telling the truth, loudly and without apology. He does not soften his words for cameras. He does not adjust his tone for audiences. He says what he sees, and what he sees is either brilliant or a disaster. And he will make sure you know exactly which one it is before you have the chance to disagree. That reputation has made him a television phenomenon. It has also made him one of the most unpredictable guests any morning show could ever book. Michael Strahan, on the other hand, has built his career on dominance, not just on the football field, where he spent over a decade dismantling offensive lines, but in the world of television, where he has done something few people expected. He transitioned from athlete to anchor and made it look effortless. He is charming, he is sharp, and he is not the kind of man who backs down. Not from a quarterback, and certainly not from a celebrity chef. So what happens when you put both of them in the same room, on live television, with no script, no safety net, and an audience watching every single second? What happened on that morning was something that nobody in that studio saw coming. And once it started, there was no stopping it. Before we get into it, if you are new here, make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below telling us what you think is going to happen. Because I promise you, whatever you are guessing right now, you are wrong. Now let us get into it. The segment was booked as a cooking demonstration. That is how it started. That is how it was pitched. And that is how it was presented to the audience when it was announced during the first commercial break of the morning. Gordon Ramsay, coming up, live in the studio, cooking for the hosts and talking about his latest project, simple, clean, the kind of segment that morning shows do every single week without any drama whatsoever. Except this was Gordon Ramsay. And nothing with Gordon Ramsay stays simple. The moment he walked out to the desk, the energy in the room shifted. You could feel it through the screen. There was a particular kind of alertness that came over the panel. Not nervousness exactly, but awareness. The awareness you get when someone enters a space, and the atmosphere changes around them, without them having to say a single word. Michael Strahan opened with a smile and a handshake and the easy confidence of a man who has interviewed everyone from presidents to pop stars. He welcomed Ramsay to the show with warmth and the kind of practiced charm that makes morning television feel approachable. It was a strong opening. Professional, comfortable. Gordon Ramsay sat down, looked directly into the camera for a moment, then looked at Michael and said, "Let's have a real conversation." Not a threat, not a declaration, just a statement, but the way he said it told everyone in that studio that whatever had been planned for the next 10 minutes was already out the window. Michael laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that comes from someone who appreciates boldness. "I like that," he said. "Let's do it." And that is where it began. The first few minutes were smooth. Ramsay talked about what he had been working on, the restaurants, the shows, the relentless pace of a life lived entirely at full volume. He was engaging, he was funny, and he had the audience in the palm of his hand within 60 seconds. This was a man who understood performance, who understood the rhythm of television, and who knew exactly how to hold a room. Michael was matching him, question for answer, energy for energy. The two of them fell into a rhythm that felt almost like a tennis match, fast, precise, with each shot returned cleanly. Then one of the other hosts asked about criticism. It was a soft question, the kind of question that is designed to get a guest talking about how they handle negativity, usually so they can give an inspiring answer about resilience and growth and all the things that make for good daytime television. The question was directed at Ramsay, almost as an aside, casually, the way you toss a topic into a conversation to see where it lands. Where it landed was somewhere unexpected. Ramsay looked at the host, who asked the question, nodded slowly, and said, "I think most people confuse criticism with cruelty. They're not the same thing. Criticism is specific. Criticism is useful. What I do is criticism. What people do to each other on the internet is not criticism. That is just noise dressed up to feel important." The studio responded well to that. There was applause, a few nods from the panel, and then Michael Strahan leaned forward slightly and said, "But some people would say the line between what you do and cruelty is pretty thin." The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means something went wrong. The kind of quiet that means everyone just realized the conversation got real. Ramsay turned and looked at Michael. Not quickly, slowly. The way someone looks at you when they want to make sure you meant what you just said before they decide how to respond to it. "Say more," Ramsay said. Michael did not hesitate. "I'm just saying that there are people who have been on your shows. Chefs, home cooks, professionals, who have talked about how your words affected them. And I think it's a fair question to ask whether being brutally honest is always necessary, or whether it sometimes just feels good to be the one in power." There it was. Not an attack, not a provocation, a question, but a question with weight behind it, with intention behind it, and with enough edge to it that the entire studio leaned in simultaneously without anyone deciding to. "Gordon." Ramsay looked at Michael Strahan for a long moment. Then he said, "That is the most interesting question anyone has asked me on television in 3 years." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that. Do not take it as a compliment yet," Ramsay said, "because my answer is going to make you uncomfortable." Michael spread his hands open on the desk. "I'm comfortable. You say that now," Ramsay said. And then he started to talk. And what came out of his mouth over the next several minutes was not what anyone in that studio, or anyone watching at home, was prepared for. Because Gordon Ramsay did not defend himself. He did not explain himself. He did not give the polished, rehearsed answer that celebrities give when they are asked uncomfortable questions on live television. He went further than that, and in going further, he said something that made Michael Strahan set down the card he was holding, forget the next question entirely, and respond in a way that turned a cooking segment into one of the most talked about morning television moments in recent memory. But to understand what Ramsay said, and why it landed the way it did, you have to understand what Michael had actually challenged him on. Because on the surface, it sounded like a question about television personas and the ethics of public criticism. But underneath it, Michael was asking something much more specific. He was asking whether Gordon Ramsay actually believed in what he did, or whether the rage, the bluntness, the relentless standard, was a character, a product, something performed for cameras and sold to audiences who wanted to watch someone get torn apart. Ramsay understood the question perfectly, and his answer made clear that he had been waiting a long time for someone to actually ask it directly, to his face, on live television, without wrapping it in politeness. What he said next changed the entire tone of the room. Gordon Ramsay leaned back in his chair, just slightly, the way someone does when they are about to say something they have thought about for a long time and have never quite said out loud in exactly the right way. "You want to know if it's real," he said. "That's what you're actually asking. You're not asking about the contestants. You're not asking about the chefs. You're asking whether I actually believe in what I do, or whether I figured out that anger sells and decided to sell it." Michael Strahan did not deny it. "I think that's a version of the question." "Yeah, then I'll give you a version of an answer," Ramsay said. "I grew up with nothing. Not television nothing, not Hollywood nothing, actual nothing. A father who could not hold a job, a family that moved constantly. A childhood that taught me one thing very clearly, which is that mediocrity has consequences. Real ones, not the kind where someone gives you a note after class. The kind where the lights go off and there is no food and nobody is coming to fix it." The studio was completely still. "So when I walk into a kitchen," Ramsay continued, "and I see someone who has every resource, every opportunity, every tool they need to do something exceptional, and they are choosing to do something average, that does not make me frustrated for television. That makes me genuinely angry, because I have seen what happens to people who settle, and nobody showed up to tell them the truth before it was too late." Michael nodded slowly. The interview rhythm was gone. This was no longer a segment. This was a conversation. "I hear that," Michael said, "and I respect it. But here's where I push back. There's a difference between holding someone to a standard and humiliating them. And I think sometimes those two things get blurred. And I think sometimes you blur them." Ramsay did not flinch. "Give me an example." "I've watched your shows," Michael said. "I've seen moments where the correction was necessary and moments where the delivery went beyond correction, where it became something else, and my question is, do you see that distinction, or does it all feel the same from where you're standing?" "You played football," Ramsay said. Michael nodded. 15 years, and in 15 years, you had coaches who got in your face and told you exactly what you were doing wrong, loudly, in front of your teammates. Did that feel like humiliation?" "Sometimes," Michael said, honestly, "sometimes it did." "And did it make you better?" "Sometimes," Michael said again, "but not always. Because sometimes what a coach thinks is motivation is actually just damage, and the player gets better in spite of it, not because of it, and you don't always know which one it was until years later." Ramsay was quiet for a real moment, the kind of silence that happens when someone says something that actually requires you to think before you respond. "That is fair," he said. The audience reacted, because those two words, coming from Gordon Ramsay, in that context, were not small. They carried weight, but he was not finished. "What I do not agree with," he continued, "is the idea that the solution is to soften everything until it becomes meaningless. Because that careful, cushioned version of feedback does not prepare anyone for the world they are actually entering." "Nobody's saying cushion everything," Michael said. "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying no, your audience. A person who just lost their restaurant, who is on the edge, maybe does not need you at full volume in that moment. Maybe they need someone to actually see them first before you start correcting them. And if there's no time," Ramsay said, "the service is happening, the food is going out, and someone is about to send out a dish that embarrasses everyone in that building. What do? You whisper?" "No," Michael said, "but you also don't make it a performance." That word landed differently than the others. Ramsay looked at Michael directly. "A performance." "I'm not saying it always is," Michael said, steady. "I'm saying that when cameras are in the room, There is always a question worth asking about what's direction and what's genuine, and I think your audience deserves to know which one they're watching. Ramsay's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in the way someone's jaw tightens when they are choosing their next words with precision. Let me ask you something, he said, and I want a real answer, not a broadcaster answer. When you were in the fourth quarter, down by 10, and your team needed everything you had, did you want someone managing your feelings? Or did you want someone who believed in you enough to demand more than you thought you had? That's different, Michael said. Is it? Yes, because on the field, everyone signed up for that. Everyone knows the stakes. But some of the people on your show are home cooks. People who saved up for years to open a small restaurant in their hometown. They did not sign up to be a lesson for a television audience. They signed a contract, Ramsay said. Gordon Michael said his name simply, without heat but with enough weight to stop the sentence Ramsay was building. You know that's not what I mean. And here is where something happened that nobody expected. Gordon Ramsay stopped, not because he had run out of things to say, but in the way someone stops when they have been called on something they already know. When the person across from them is not trying to win, but trying to get somewhere. True. I know it's not what you mean, Ramsay said, and his voice had dropped into a register that was less performance and more person. And I'm not going to stand behind a contract as a defense. That's a lawyer's answer, and this is not a legal conversation. What I will say, he continued, is that there are moments I have replayed, not because a producer flagged them, but because I replayed them myself and thought, that one went too far. Not the standard. The standard was right. But the delivery, the specific words in that specific moment to that specific person, nobody moved. And the reason I would do them differently is not because of cameras or anyone's feelings about my brand. It's because the point was getting lost inside the delivery. And if the point gets lost, then what exactly was any of it for? Michael looked at him for a moment. Then he said, that is the most honest thing I've heard on this show in a long time. And Ramsay, without a pause, without a smile, said, don't make it a headline. The audience laughed, the kind of laugh that releases pressure without erasing what just happened. But the segment was not over, because what came next was not planned, not prompted, and not something either man would have predicted when they sat down at that desk. One of the other hosts tossed in a lighter question, the kind designed to bring the energy back before a commercial break. They asked whether Gordon Ramsay, the man who had dedicated his life to culinary perfection, ever just ate something simple because it made him feel good, rather than because it was technically good. Ramsay answered. Then he turned to Michael and said, what about you? What's yours? Michael answered. And in answering, he said something that Gordon Ramsay immediately, instinctively, and very publicly disagreed with. And the room ignited all over again. Macaroni and cheese, Michael said, out of the box. That is my comfort food, always has been. He said it with the confidence of a man who has absolutely no shame about it, which is the only correct way to admit something like that on national television. Gordon Ramsay stared at him, not a playful stare, not a performative stare, the kind of stare a man gives when he has just heard something that conflicts with everything he has built his life around and he is deciding, in real time, how to respond without dismantling the entire mood of the last 20 minutes. Out of the box, Ramsay repeated. Out of the box, Michael confirmed. Completely unbothered. The powder, Ramsay said, you are talking about the orange powder. I am talking about the orange powder, Michael said. The audience was already laughing. Everyone in that studio understood that something was coming, and everyone was delighted about it. Ramsay placed both hands flat on the desk. It was a deliberate movement, the kind someone makes when they need a moment to collect themselves before speaking. Michael, he said. Gordon, Michael replied. Macaroni and cheese from a box is not comfort food. It is the absence of effort dressed up in nostalgia. It is what happens when someone decides that the memory of feeling good is more important than actually feeling good. Wow, Michael said. I am being kind. Ramsay said. You are being a lot of things right now. Michael said. Kind is not the first word I would choose. What would you choose? Dramatic, Michael said, without hesitation. The audience loved that. Ramsay himself almost smiled. You just described macaroni and cheese like it personally wronged you, Michael said. Like it showed up at your restaurant, ordered the tasting menu, sent everything back, and left a bad review. Ramsay pointed at him. That is actually a fair comparison. I know it is, Michael said. I was a good student. The exchange now had a completely different texture than it had 20 minutes earlier. The heaviness had lifted, not disappeared, because what they had said to each other still sat in the room and still mattered. But it had been joined by something lighter. The ease that comes after two people have been genuinely honest with each other and survived it. But Ramsay was not done. Here is what I will offer you, he said. I will make you macaroni and cheese. Right now, at that station, with real ingredients, in the time it would take you to boil that water and open that box. And you are going to tell me honestly whether there is a difference. Michael looked at him. You're serious. I am always serious about food, Ramsay said. That is the one thing you should have learned by now. Michael looked at his co-hosts who were already gesturing enthusiastically. He looked back at Ramsay. He looked at the audience, which was making its position very clear. "All right," Michael said, "let's do it." Ramsay moved to the cooking station and began working with the kind of focused intensity that is genuinely disorienting to watch in person, because there is a difference between watching someone cook on a cooking show, where the environment is built around the cooking, and watching someone cook on a morning show, where the cooking is supposed to be a backdrop. Ramsay did not treat it as a backdrop. Michael stood nearby watching, and to his credit, watching with genuine attention, not the polite attention of a television host going through the motions, but the attention of someone being shown something they had not expected to find interesting and were finding interesting anyway. "What is that?" Michael said. "That," Ramsay said, without looking up, "is what cheese actually looks like before someone dehydrates it, puts it in a packet, and sells it to you for $1.49. You do not have to keep doing that." Michael said, "It is load-bearing to my entire argument." Ramsay said. Michael laughed. "Load-bearing? If I stop reminding you what you have been eating," Ramsay said, "you will go home tonight and make it again, and we will have accomplished nothing here today." "I was going to make it anyway," Michael said. Ramsay stopped and looked at him. "I'm joking," Michael said. "You are not joking," Ramsay said, "but you will be after this." When he placed the dish in front of Michael, the studio had shifted from rowdy to genuinely curious in about 90 seconds, which is a remarkable thing for a live audience that had been laughing for the better part of 4 minutes. Michael looked at the dish, then at Ramsay. "I want you to know," he said, "that no matter what this tastes like, I am not going to give you the satisfaction of a dramatic reaction. You will not be able to help it," Ramsay said simply. Michael took a bite, chewed, set the fork down, looked straight ahead for a moment with the expression of someone privately renegotiating something they had believed for a long time. Then he turned to Ramsay and said, "I hate that you're right." The studio came apart. Ramsay nodded once, with the quiet satisfaction of a man who never doubted the outcome but appreciates the acknowledgement. "That," Ramsay said, "is what happens when someone who knows what they are doing decides you deserve the real thing instead of the convenient thing." Michael looked at him, and something in that look made clear he understood Ramsay was not talking entirely about macaroni and cheese. "You know what?" Michael said. "I think we have been talking about more than food this whole time. Food tells the truth about everything else," Ramsay said. "What you accept on a plate is usually what you accept everywhere else. And when someone shows you there is a better version available, the only question worth asking is whether you are willing to put down the box." The studio held that for a moment. Then Michael looked at Ramsay and said, in a voice that had none of the broadcaster warmth and all of the actual warmth, "I think you might be the most unexpectedly profound person I have ever had at this desk." "I am a chef," Ramsay said. "What we make either nourishes someone or it does not. And that is not a small thing. That is everything." The audience applauded, not the automatic applause of a live studio cue, but the kind that comes from a room full of people who came in expecting to watch someone cook pasta and are leaving, having witnessed something they did not anticipate. And that is what morning television almost never delivers. A conversation that actually means something, wrapped inside a segment that was only ever supposed to be about food. Two people built for competition, deciding, just for a moment, to compete at honesty instead, and nobody losing. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Gordon Ramsay's brutal honesty is what people actually need, or does he take it too far? Drop your answer in the comments below, and if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now because this is what we do here every single time.